Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we got a late start today because I was checking in some code.
And, there are worse things in this world than doing real work.
I had a merge conflict, speaking of James Montemagno.
Wow. Speaking of merge conflicts, yeah.
Well, it wasn't my conflict, but it happens when you have a big team and everybody's working on the same stuff that, you can get the latest code, make your change, and go to check it in 5 or 10 minutes, and there's going to be a merge conflict.
There's going to be something changed since then already.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's like a game of who's first.
Yeah, but it's great to be working on a team that's moving that kind of velocity.
Oh, yeah.
Constant code updates. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's crazy right now. All right, well, let's roll the music for Better Know a Framework.
Awesome. All right, dude, what do you got?
All right, this is a really cool GitHub repository called 100 Days of Machine Learning Code.
Wow.
As proposed by Siraj Raval. Hope I didn't mess up your name, Siraj. And this is basically everything that you need to know about machine learning in steps with code and really colorful slides. And I believe he's on day, 40? Yeah, 43.
That's cool.
So he's going through 100 days of ML code. And it's really well done. I got to say that, I see a lot of these things, and some of them are boring and not inviting at all. Not this. This is good. Good graphics, good colors, well explained. That's good stuff.
100 days is a lot. That's a lot of work and a lot of practice. So that's pretty cool.
Yep. Sure is. Awesome, well, if you're serious about it, there you go.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of machine learning.
Yeah. Who's talking to us today, Richard?
Knowing we were going to talk a little Windows stuff, I went back to a show we recorded around Build with Raymond Chen and Jason Watson, talking about Windows sets.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an interesting conversation. It's just not, back when there was a Windows team. Remember back then? There was this... It was interesting to see the Windows guys sort of engaging more, not just showing a finished product, but saying, hey, we have this idea around tabs and sets and things, and we're experimenting with it. That conversation was kind of cool. Yeah. Got a lot of comments. But this particular comment is from Dominic Janzik, who says, and this is about 3 months ago, I've been using virtual desktops as my personal laptop since at least a year now. It was a huge boost to my productivity when combined with Windows hibernation and Chrome tabs. I'm a working and studying guy, so being able to switch quickly between my entertainment desktop to one of my 3 different development projects, all with already open windows, makes a huge difference. And the ease of creating a fresh desktop when there is need to start something new is a huge win for me. But there is one issue, which was mentioned in this episode, that is still working and consuming resources, which is often a very good thing. But if it was possible to freeze and put the whole, quote, desktop on the shelf, that would be the killer feature for me. But I'm afraid that Windows sets, as its integration at the tab level, would not actually do what we need it to do.
Yeah, you want like a snapshot.
Well, this, I think, is exactly what we talked about, was this idea of I have all my windows laid out the way I want them laid out for this particular project. And I want that, mode reduced to an icon. So it's like, click this and boom, there's everything right where we were. This sort of freeze on in place thing. And that's, I think, what Dominic's wanting too. So I can't argue with him. I like that idea.
Yeah, good idea.
So Dominic, thank you so much for your comment. A copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Google Plus and Facebook. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet. We drag him to the trash. I'm sorry, the recycle bin. Did I say the trash? Oh my God, it's been so long.
Anymore. There's no trash.
When was the last time you emptied your recycle bin?
It happens when I drag something over there where it says I can't even fit this in the recycle bin. We're just going to delete it now. Like, okay.
I mean, the discs are so big.
They're so darn big. Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've had to clean up my system disk.
I went to record a Hansel Minutia for the first time in a year, and he blue screened his machine as we were setting up. And so, of course, derailed the entire conversation. But he was forced to do a check disk, and his boot drive is 2 flipping terabytes. Right? So, please stand by.
Was he recording with his machine, or did he have a separate recorder? Because that would have been gold.
He was recording with his machine. So we still ended up streaming a bunch of it up to YouTube. So it was pretty funny.
That's good.
Yeah. We also discovered that with a Google Hangout, even if the guy who set it up goes down like he did, you stay on. So I didn't know I was still streaming over YouTube, and I was laughing to myself. I'll bet that guy blue screen. I'll bet you anything he blue screen. And then I get a message from him. I blue screen. It's like, yep, called it.
Funny stuff.
Happens.
All right, let's bring Immo on here. Immo Landwerth has been on the show before. He's working as a program manager at Microsoft on the .NET platform, and this includes the base class libraries, the portability mechanisms, and open source. Welcome back, Immo.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thanks for being here again. It's Windows Compatibility Pack is your latest thing.
Yeah, that's right. We shipped this almost, I think, 6 months ago now. So the idea is that with .NET Core 2.0, we added much more API service to .NET Core to make it easier for people to port the existing applications to .NET Core.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the primary reasons we built .NET Core was we wanted to have a cross-platform story, right? So that you can write your website in ASP.NET and have them run in a Docker container running on Linux or something, right? And but our existing customers are, starting on the .NET framework, which was Windows only.
Yeah.
So a good chunk of the code is using Windows technologies. And so we thought about how we approach this with giving people more access to Windows technologies while still remaining as much cross-platform as we possibly can. And so what we ended up doing was to say, well, what if we give you a NuGet package that is essentially wrapping up all the Windows APIs that we have and provide them in a nice cross-platform fashion, right? Effectively, you can just reference the package, and then you get access to about 34 NuGet packages, I think, that provide some Windows-only technologies, some cross-platform technologies. And so you just drop this one thing in, and then you get an additional, I think, 22,000 APIs or something like that.
Wow.
And that includes all your usual friends, like, the Windows event log, some of the WCF stuff, SQL Server, a bunch of other stuff that people are used to over the years.
Now, I wonder if the things that are Windowsy that are absolutely having to run on Windows, like the enterprise manager stuff, do you have like mocks where things won't work cross-platform, just at least so that you have the interfaces?
So if you look at I wrote a blog post and trying to explain what our philosophy there is. So there's some stuff like the Windows registry, for example, where mocking really isn't an option, right? I mean, I think Mono did this at some point where they said, well, we can just implement the registry APIs over INI files on disk, right?
Yeah.
Yikes.
So that sort of works when people use the registry as a glorified, file storage, right? But many people use the registry to find out information about the operating system, right? So they go to HKLM, ask what the current Windows version is or something like that. And you can't really make this work in a cross-platform fashion and with, some crazy gymnastics, right?
Right.
So the registry that we provide is Windows only. And so by Windows only, I really mean we have an implementation for cross-platform, but that implementation just throws platform not supported exception.
Okay.
So the idea here is that you can write code that says, if I'm running on Windows, call the registry APIs.
Right.
And if I'm not running on Windows, don't call the registry API.
Right.
Right. And meanwhile, all the interfaces are there so nothing's going to blow up.
Correct. So you basically have access to the APIs. So the JIT compiler will not fail with, unresolved methods or anything.
Right.
But if you call the APIs, they will actually explode. And so clearly that is not something we want to promote as the, this is the way you should write apps. But
it seems like the best way to do it, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you need to have access to Windows technologies, then yes. I would say, if you write a cross-platform app today, maybe don't take a dependency on the registry at all, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then the way you would do it, you would just say, where do I have to store my information? And then you would, I don't know, let's say you want to store some user settings, you would find a config file, and then you would have the exact same APIs and the technologies on Linux and Windows. So you just use, let's say, an XML file, and you just use an XML reader writer to store your settings.
Sure.
So if you can help it, don't introduce Windows-only APIs for areas where it doesn't make sense, right? For some areas, it clearly makes sense, but I would say for things like settings, probably not.
Well, and again, I think this is the right approach because you're talking about customers who are porting their apps from Windows to .NET Core.
Right.
So there you go. These apps are bound to have some of these Windows-only things in them.
Right. And the nice thing with an if check is, if you deep in your bowels of the application, you have a third-party component that uses the registry, you can just guard the call very high up your stack and say, if I'm not running on Windows, don't even go down that path at all.
Right.
And you don't have to re-implement, potentially third-party libraries.
Yeah.
Just so you can run on Linux. And so that's basically the approach we have taken. And then there's some other stuff that could be cross-platform today, but isn't for implementation reasons. A good example here is directory services, which is just a way to talk to an LDAP server.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this could be cross-platform, but the way we implemented it in .NET, V1 days was by p-invoking into Windows that does the LDAP calls for us.
Yeah.
So the implementation of directory service right now just relies on Windows. So we could make part of it available cross-platform, but we haven't done this yet. So part of our effort was to, let's get as much as we can. And then, if there's more desire to make things cross-platform that isn't today, then, based on customer feedback, we will invest in that area. And if not, then, if we haven't done the work. So that's basically the current state. And then if you look at .NET Core 3.0, which is what will ship next year, we even extend this Windows technology set even further to the UI stacks as well. So in .NET Core 3.0, you will have access to WinForms and WPF, which, very ginormous Windows technologies.
Yeah.
And same question there I receive on the blog all the time is like, why is it not available cross-platform, or is it available cross-platform? So these things next year will not be available cross-platform. They will be Windows only as they are today. They're just ported from .NET Framework to .NET Core, so that you can write .NET Core-based desktop applications. So you get all the benefits of .NET Core. You will be able to deploy self-contained. You will be deployed with a shared framework if you want to. You get all the investments you've done in performance areas like, I/O and, file system and many other things. You get all the community contributions we did, part of our open source work. And so you have a modern technology essentially underneath your desktop app, and you get all the deployment benefits. Now, why do we not make it cross-platform? Well, part of it is because it's ginormous amount of work to do that, and doing cross-platform in general is hard, and it's even harder when it's a UI stack, right? That's when,
sure.
It's not just, drawing rectangles, right? It's also the metaphors that you have to nail, right? I mean, my canonical example is on Windows, the OK button is on the left-hand side and the cancel button is on the right-hand side,
Right.
versus on Mac, that's the other way around. So those are the things that you have to think about when you design a cross-platform UI stack. And there really are, there are a few offerings out there today that do cross-platform, but they all have different trade-offs, right? Miguel talked about this high fidelity, low fidelity thing. When you take an Electron app, it's just a website essentially. So you have low fidelity, but, reach. And then you have things like, custom UI for every operating system, which is a lot of work on your end, but then you look native on all operating systems.
Right.
And so we don't know what our story there is yet. Maybe we have an offering at some point. Currently, we don't have one, but we still want to be able to give existing customers as many of the benefits of the new stack as we can. And of course, then long term, we will figure out what the story is. But I would be shocked if you make WPF or WinForms as they are today available cross-platform at any point in time, because I think we will probably be better off building a new UI stack at that point that is actually designed from the get-go for cross-platform. And it probably will have YAML elements in it or whatever, but you think about the control set and many other things from a cross-platform standpoint from day one, and that's quite hard.
Well, and there are already a few ways to do that, but yeah, you're right. There isn't any need for Windows Forms and WPF to go cross-plat. I don't think, anyway.
But if you were going to do it, your first step would be to put those UI elements into a separate package so that they could be developed independently for each of those platforms.
Right. That's basically the Xamarin Forms approach, right? Like in Xamarin Forms, they basically wrap the UI provider from the operating system, and they give you, what they call Duplo blocks, right? These very high level building blocks like a button or, a multi-page view. And then on Windows Phone, it used the pivot control, and versus on Mac, it would use the tabular control. So you basically pick up the metaphors that make sense for each operating system, but you express them in some sort of agnostic way, right? So you find some sort of higher level language. And then, if you want to customize, you just, tweak it, for each operating system individually. And that's kind of the same thing we do in class libraries today. I mean, like I said, like the registry example is where you write some if-based logic.
Right.
And then the next step would be in Visual Studio with the new project system, you can use what we call multi-targeting. So you can configure your project to build multiple times. So you have one project that is built for .NET Framework and build again for .NET Core, and then build again for Xamarin, and then build again for UWP. So at that point, you can also do pound if, conditional compilation in your source code, and you can say, if I'm on UWP, call UWP, let's say, device APIs to access the GPS. If I'm on Android, then use the Android APIs.
Right.
If I'm on iOS, use the iOS APIs. And so this way you can write yourself basically wrappers around, specific services that are OS specific and expose them in some sort of agnostic, .NET API. Let's say you have a method called get GPS coordinates that just returns a tuple of two, doubles in it. And then you can call this API from all your business logic and don't have to worry about how you get the GPS coordinates per operating system. And that's kind of what my friend James did with their new, forgot what the official name now is. It used to be called Caboodle, which is effectively a bunch of, Xamarin Essentials, that's what it's called, a bunch of, things everybody uses like GPS or, touch or many other things. And they give you a .NET API so you don't have to do it yourself.
Right.
And I think that's kind of, the role we are taking, like making more and more things portable while also not hiding the operating system entirely and saying, yep, if you need more fidelity, then by all means, access the operating system's APIs directly.
There's some great community stuff out there too, like Uno. Where the guys took the whole UI stack of UWP and ported it across all platforms. So now you write it for UWP and then you just recompile it for everything else. Sort of like Xamarin Forms, but using a more standard XAML library.
Yeah, I've talked to the guy at Bill. Like, it was a very impressive demo that he showed me. Where basically, you have normal XAML and renders in the browser, and it looks pretty compelling.
Oh, that's ooey, right?
You mean we?
Yeah, we. ooey. Yeah, we is in the browser, and Uno is UWP based. Yeah,
and like it's quite interesting to see where these things are going. And I mean, there's many projects like that, right? There's WebAssembly coming as well. The ASP.NET guys are building this thing called Blazor, which is effectively Razor, but rendered on the client side of the WebAssembly.
Yep. Oh yeah.
So there's many more ways you can skin that cat and provide effectively UI across the board. And many people have asked me as well, is like, why is Microsoft not building this one way of doing things? And I think honestly, like, these times are kind of over at this point. It's not so much, Microsoft doesn't have the power or anything. It's just, when .NET Framework was created originally, there was just the PC, right? And the PC was a, unified form factor, right? The displays would get bigger, the hardware would get faster, and disk space and, screen real estate really wasn't an issue.
There's just more and more and more of everything.
And now we see it's much more diversified, right? Now you have different cell phones, different tablet form factors, you have, washing machines and like fridges with displays. And, it's really hard to come up with the one way of doing things and then, assume that you can build an application model that makes everybody happy, right? And I think that just doesn't work anymore. If you want your customers to be happy, you kind of have to build an application that makes sense for a particular purpose. And that usually requires more diverse tools as well. So, sometimes it's a website, sometimes it's a native mobile app, sometimes it's, a desktop app with, buttons and, keyboard and mouse, and sometimes it's touch. And so building one application model for everybody, nothing works.
And often they're looking to switch to other options later too. It's like, we started out building it for this, just on browser, but now we want to be on phones. Oh, and we, want to work great on tablets. And can we get it on the Xbox? Can we make it work across Chromecast? Like, it goes on and on and on. People are asking for more and more there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And guys, hold that thought right there while we take this minute for a very important message.
Save the date for .NET Conf 2018, September 12th through 14th. .NET Conf is a free 3-day virtual developer event co-organized by the .NET community and Microsoft. Over the course of 3 days, you can enjoy a wide selection of live sessions that feature speakers from the community and .NET product teams. These are the experts in their field, and .NET Conf is a chance to learn, ask questions live, and get inspired for your next software project. You will learn to build for web, mobile, cloud, desktop games, services, libraries, and more for a variety of platforms and devices, all with .NET. There are sessions for everyone, no matter if you are starting out or a seasoned engineer. Expect presentations on .NET Core and ASP.NET Core, C#, F#, Azure, Visual Studio, Xamarin, and much more. Head to www.dotnetconf.net. That's .netconf.net to learn more and tune in.
And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's Richard Campbell. And that's Immo Landwerth. And we're talking about the Windows Compatibility Pack and all the problems that it solves and the problems inherent in taking something like .NET that started out as Windows-centric and moving it to an open source world. And, you know, the black eyes along the way. Things change and they have to change. So this is a very welcome addition to the family, because it means that people can take their Windows-centric .NET apps and port them to .NET Core, and at least you can get something to compile, and then you can start paring down, the things that aren't very open-sourcey.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, some people have also brought up that the Compat Pack brings a whole bunch of legacy stuff, like things that we have abandoned.
Right.
And the reasons there are the same, right? Like if you have an existing app that works and it's 10 years old, sure, you use legacy technology because you used what was current 10 years ago, but it works. And if the only thing you have to do every once in a while do minor touch-ups here and there, it's just not good investment to refactor the whole thing into something completely different, right?
Sure.
And so same thing here. If you could take an existing .NET Framework, web app or desktop app and have it largely work the exact same way as today, but benefit from, let's say, the runtime just being faster, the deployment being, X copy rather than relying on a global machine install, then, you get a lot of benefits for pretty much, or very minimal effort on your end, right? And that's generally a good thing. At the same time, yes, it would be nice if we could remove the legacy APIs from the framework and have everybody use the right APIs. But I mean, people always say like just delete the APIs, but the reality is that if we have billions and billions of apps out there that are written by millions and millions of customers, then if we start from scratch, then you basically also start with 0 customers, and that's just not a good strategy for .NET all up. And that's why in 2.0 and with 3.0 we add much more of the existing API surface back to make it easier. While of course we will still say if you want to build a cloud scalable app, maybe don't use the registry, maybe you shouldn't use some of the old performance counter APIs and other things that make your thing slow. But, if you have an existing in-house app that is used by 10 customers a day, then, who cares, right?
Yeah.
So like there's clearly a continuum there as well. And so one of the things we also try to figure out is how we can make it easier for people to take existing code, have it work, while also promoting that some APIs they're using are legacy and they should move to something else. And in the past, we have been using the obsolete attribute for that, but that doesn't work super well for various reasons. So we're now trying to move more towards the Drossel analyzer-based model that has a bit more contextual information and then gives you more actionable and fewer warnings, while still nudging people towards the right APIs, right? So the idea here is if you're a completely new developer and you start filing a new project and you copy and paste some code from Stack Overflow and you immediately get a squiggle that says, dude, this API is really obsolete to use this other API over here. Maybe even with a smart fixer where you just control dot and it automatically rewrites your code to the modern API, then I think we have a pretty good solid offering where we can take new developers onto the right path from day one, while we also make it so that for existing customers, it works.
That would be awesome if the error messages started with the word dude. Wouldn't it? Just like the helpful messages. Dude, what are you doing? Dude, reporting it now.
I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah,
awesome.
I do like that idea of, you've cut and pasted from too old of a Stack Overflow post, right? Then that's a 2008 post, man. Don't use that. That's a mistake.
Dude, I recognize that code.
You go find a newer post. I know this. The copy you're looking for is out there. It's just not this.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your blog post from November of last year where you announced the compatibility pack, and there were a bunch of the components that were marked as still coming rather than available. Have those things moved along?
Yes, I believe everything that is marked as coming has been shipped already.
Oh, wow.
Also, the Compat Pack is stable at this point, so it's, I think 201 is the latest version, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and 201 is like brand new and fresh. It's only been like the past week that 201 came out.
Oh yeah. I think the 201. The 201 was also longer, and 201 is something we just recently updated.
Yeah.
The interesting thing with the Compat Pack is that it's what we call a meta package. So the Compat Pack is basically empty. It's a NuGet package that just references other NuGet packages.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea here is that if you start with an existing code base, you just want to maximize the number of APIs you can have, right? So just, get the compiler errors down from hundreds to maybe 10.
Right.
And then as you're maintaining your app, you probably want to remove the reference to the entire Compat Pack with references to the actual things you're using.
Oh,
the
cool.
idea here being that you don't want to, increase the debt over time. You want to reduce the debt over time, right? So at least contain the damage, if you will. Don't, if you don't use the registry, don't reference it, right?
Right.
If you don't use performance counters, don't introduce it, right? And so the idea here is that, if you can do that, then that's even better. And then you can make progress towards getting the number of those dependencies maybe even to zero and replace them with modern technologies if your goal ultimately is to go cross-platform, right? If your goal is to just stay on Windows, then by all means, leave it as is.
And if I'm reading your mindset here, it's that, all right, I've got an existing standard framework application here. We're looking to migrate it to core. Let's get my implementation of core as close to standard as possible before we try compiling, so that we only have a handful of things to fix instead of enough that you just like, we might as well start over.
Right.
Just try to make that a little less painful. But you're going to end up with a bunch of stuff you don't need when the time comes. It's not just a big framework anymore. It's a bunch of NuGet packages, and you can scrape off the ones you don't need.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, at least it's going to compile, or it'll be close to compiling.
Yeah.
If it's going to work or not, that's a different story. But then the things that aren't working are generally the platform-specific things. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Yeah. It's time to announce that during the last 10 minutes, I used the Compat Pack to port a legacy Windows app to the phone. Yes, I immobilized it.
Okay.
See what I did there?
Immobilized? Demobilized?
Immobilized it.
Oh, no. We're making puns on the guest, too.
Well, it's Mr. Compat Pack.
I love it.
It's actually time to give away a $200 Amazon gift card, compliments of Progress Telerik, to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. But first, let me tell you about the most comprehensive developer toolkit for building modern apps on the market today, Telerik DevCraft. With more than 1,100 Telerik.NET and Kendo UI JavaScript components and controls, you can easily build modern, high-performant web, mobile, and desktop apps, as well as chatbots. The toolset also includes reporting solutions, automated testing, and productivity tools, and comes with a range of support options. New this year is a free online training program for all license holders. And with this, alongside thousands of demos with source code, comprehensive docs, and a full assortment of Visual Studio templates, you'll be up and running with the Progress Telerik and Kendo UI tools in no time. Download a free 30-day trial today at telerik.com/download.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Caius Bergeron.
Congratulations, Caius.
Bergeron.
Golf clap for you.
Golf clap for Caius. And Caius just won a $200 Amazon gift card thanks to Progress Telerik, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you'd like to be a member, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the club. We have thousands of members all over the world, and every show we like to give away stuff from our sponsors, and every December we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member selected at random. But you got to sign up if you want to win. All right, Immo, it's your turn. If you had $5,000 to spend on technology today, what would you buy?
So I would probably, I think last time you asked me, I said I would buy a bigger drone. That is probably still true. I would probably still invest more in my photography stuff. But
would you weaponize it?
Probably not, but I would probably get more drones because more drones are always better.
That's the next step, weaponizing, or at least dropping firecracker bombs.
Nice.
That'd be fun.
What drone are you using now, Immo?
I'm currently using the Mavic Pro, and I love it.
Yeah, good machine.
It is such a like to me, it's about the size, right? There's bigger drones, but you don't carry them around, right? Like you don't. And the best camera is the one that you have with you, right? That's the old wisdom. And if I go on a hike and I can pack something that is like 400 grams or something, I will probably carry it with me. But if it's like a 10 kilogram or 15 kilogram giant box, well, then guess what? The drone remains at home.
Yeah, you're not even going to bring it. And you say you want to use a drone with bicycling?
So there's this new coming trend of like drones that are fully autonomous, where you just basically start them and they just track you.
Right.
So if you are biking, on a nice path, you just have these awesome shots where the drone is just following you through the forest, for example, avoiding trees and all of that.
Yeah.
And you get really amazing footage of you riding the bike.
And the Mavic Pro definitely has active track, right?
It does, but not to that extent.
Yeah.
It's still like something you have to kind of like pay attention to. And I think the Mavic only has forward sensors and upward facing sensors. It doesn't have anything to the sides. So it's not that good at maneuvering inside a forest. And there's like dedicated drones now that have like a gazillion sensors all around it, and it will automatically avoid obstacles, tree branches and all of that. And it's just, from a technological standpoint, I find it super interesting.
Yeah.
But also from a result point of view, it's awesome.
It seems like DJI basically has the market sewn up. Like their devices are so popular and so comprehensive, I don't know that anybody comes close to them.
That is certainly true. I mean, GoPro tried, right?
Yeah, they did.
They're not really close.
Yeah, it's hard to do, but you could certainly burn a lot of cash over there.
Yes, you can.
Yep. And I just picked up cycling, and it's even more expensive there.
Oh yeah, yeah. You could swallow up $5,000 in bicycling in no time at all. Just a carbon fiber frame and a couple of carbon fiber rims, and you're done. That's it. You don't even have a gear changer yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
$5,000 is basically half a bike.
Yeah. Well, I dig the frame, but those rims are brittle enough that you hit them hard and they don't bend, they shatter, and you're starting over. It's like time for a new rim.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't do that.
No, make you sad. So what's interesting now is in hindsight, realizing, I remember reading about the compatibility pack when you first announced it late last year, and I've been meaning to do this show for a while, is now with the Core 3 announcements and how they want to add in the new versions of WinForms and WPF. It very much is modeled after the same mindset of it's just a separate package that you add on.
That's right. Although we probably will not make it a NuGet package. We will probably make it an optional, like a new concept that we come up with. And the reason for that is that NuGet packages have versions.
Right.
And the problem with version entities is that they can get out of sync with the framework you are targeting. That's the problem we have today with ASP.NET.
Right.
Where when you upgrade from .NET Core 2.0 to 2.1, you want the corresponding version of ASP.NET, not the 2.0 version of ASP.NET.
Right.
And so same with WinForms and WPF. Ideally, we can get to the point where you can just say, similar to how you do it on .NET Framework 2.0, where you just reference system.windows.forms.dll, but you don't specify the version because you just get this whatever comes with the framework.
Right.
And so we try to come up with a model how we can have the same logic there, but you basically just say, I want WinForms or I want WPF, not specifying a version, and you just magically bind to the one that is the correct one for your platform.
Right.
Or your version of .NET Core, I should say.
You seem to be describing a concept of not all version numbers are made equally, that the version of Core you're running dictates the versions of the other things you will run. So Core is the more important version number.
Correct.
All right. So, yeah, but we don't want to know what the version number of the WPF or WinForms that will run against Core will even be. You just want it to look at the version of Core and go, I'll get that. And if I upgrade Core, it should upgrade that.
And if you downgrade, you should also downgrade.
Yes.
Like that's because otherwise you have an inconsistent state that doesn't even run anymore.
Right.
And I can see that happening because you go and grab a new version of Core ahead of the new version of WinForms and go, uh-oh, now what? And it's like, well, let me downgrade you and take you back to all of the version that has everything you want running in it.
Right. Basically, the only thing you want to control is the drop down for the Core platform, and everything else you just follow in line. Whether you go up or you go down, you just want a consistent setting.
Right.
That's basically the goal.
But if you guys put out a new version of Core ahead of new versions of other APIs, we may have to downgrade Core. Like I could almost see a tool where it's like, find me the highest version number of everything that will work together.
Yes, that's a hard problem.
Yeah, no.
I mean, every single time I'm using package managers, that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, this idea that there's actually a hierarchy to version number significance, right? That logically core is your most important version number, and most other things are dictated from there. Right up until it doesn't work, until there's a problem with that.
Yeah.
Because and you guys can't wait forever. Like, you can't hold back releasing a version of core while you wait for every other team to upgrade their things. You need to get that version out there. The people can upgrade to it, will upgrade to it. But yeah, maybe there's almost a version checking thing that as you go to upgrade core, it checks all the packages to say, well, what's going to need to be replaced? Is that available before it goes ahead?
Hmm.
Yeah, that is kind of what we have done. I mean, we kind of try to make the platform itself at least no longer composed in terms of packages, right? So ASP.NET already kind of moved away from that. Like in 2.1, you no longer have a version number of ASP.NET in the package name because it's coming from the SDK.
Right.
So the idea is that the number of moving pieces that you have to worry about are just less, right? And then you only have to think about third-party components. And for those, the hope is that they are largely agnostic, right? They largely just work.
Right.
Because realistically, the biggest problems of Compat is usually within the framework itself. Because, of course, our implementations depend on each other and they depend on the specifics on each other versus things that sit on top just depend on the public API surface. And that's a much cleaner and much easier thing to reason about. And
yeah.
So, chances are if you upgrade from .NET Core, 1.1 to 2.0, your NuGet packages don't have to be upgraded. They just continue to work because we did a good enough job with backwards compatibility in the framework, right? But like within the framework layer itself, we really don't think about what will happen if you upgrade, the core system underneath ASP.NET or the other way around.
Yeah.
Right? And like it's very hard to reason about those things. And that's where stuff tends to break today too often.
Yeah.
Man, it's really hard to believe that there's 22,000 Windows specific APIs in the framework.
Holy man.
I mean, I would
It's probably more than that, actually. The framework is 250,000 APIs. So 250,000 APIs. That's what's in .NET Framework. And then I would guesstimate that WinForms and WPF combined are probably on the order of between 50 and 100,000, I would say.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess, when you put it that way.
Yeah, but I mean, most of the APIs are just, properties or something, right?
Right.
Then suddenly a small number like 20,000 sounds like good news when you're up against 250,000. What? You mean less than 10%? That's awesome.
Yeah. Right. And it goes to show you what actually did port.
Yeah,
right.
I guess the question is, when I look at this list, and again, I'm back on your blog post again of these Windows. They weren't only Windows only ones, but they were really other APIs that were sort of adjacent to this problem. How many of these do you feel are more deprecated? Like you should be doing this a different way now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think deprecation is also somewhat in the eye of the beholder, right? Depending on what your task is, some technologies are more appropriate than others. Yep. I would say take SQL, right? If you build Facebook, SQL, you would probably think of this as deprecated, right? Because you don't build a scalable cloud platform on top of the SQL Server necessarily, right? I mean, if you look at Stack Overflow, yes, they use SQL, but they use SQL layered with like a million caches in front of it, right? So like if you build a cloud app, you really want to think about how you cache stuff, how you avoid recomputing things, like hitting the disk in particular, right?
Right.
And so if you optimize for that scenario, yep, SQL looks like a bad choice, right? Other things like Cosmos or I forgot the other name. There's like caching solutions effectively that distribute stuff in memory so that you don't have to hit the disk as much. And so those are more appropriate there. And the same is true in other cases. I mean, some people would think XML is deprecated and JSON is the new thing, right? But
right.
Again, it depends. If you have to write an XML file because that's what the customer needs or that's what the interface spec tells you to do, then XML is fine, right? And so like there's those kind of aspects, and then there's just blatant technology choices that on our side are no longer up to date. I mean, you really shouldn't use array list, right? You really shouldn't use hash table, right? You should really use list of T and dictionary, right? Or same with like performance counters, right? There's better ways to do diagnostics now. You really shouldn't use performance counters at all anymore. And so I would say within the, purely obsolete tech, I don't think it's even that much. I think, I would guess it's probably 15%, 20% of the Compat pack at maximum. And the rest is just in the, well, whether you consider it obsolete or not depends on your scenario and your, how you use the technology. And that is also what makes it really hard for us to have this binary decision, right, with the obsolete attribute. Well, is it obsolete? Well, it depends, right? And so, like, sometimes you have to give people guidance and say, well, depending on which app you're building, they're better and there are worse choices to be made, and consider what you want to get out of this, and then make your choice appropriately.
What's the biggest hurdle people are going to run into when using the compatibility pack?
I think the biggest problem is likely that people overestimate how many gaps it fills, because it sounds like it's filling a lot. It's 22,000 APIs or whatever, so it's significant in size. Right. It's I think half of core or something. But if you have an existing desktop app, with WinForms and WPF, today the Compat pack does not close that gap. Like, you still have to rethink your UI, right? Or if you're using ASP.NET MVC on .NET Framework, you still have to move to ASP.NET Core MVC, right? So there's still stuff you have to do in order to get to Core. And so depending on what app you have, like, the bigger the app is, the more, Windowsms you have, the harder it will be to port it to Core. So what we usually do is we try to make it so that people think more from the bottom up. Like, usually when people move to Core, they don't move the whole app to Core. They move part of the app to Core. Yeah. But let's say a particular web service or a particular console app or something. And then as they're doing this, they clearly want to share controls or components between, the existing desktop app that they still have to maintain until they have parity on Core, and then new investments in Core. And that's where the standard kicks in, and you can also reference the Compat pack from the standard. And I saw that a lot of people were confused about why you can reference the Compat pack from standard. But the reason is that you don't want to, have to compile your own class libraries multiple times. You just want to have one class library that can work on Framework and Core with no changes. And then again, you just have an if check for the registry and either use it or you don't. Yes, that class library will now, depending on how you write it, not work cross-platform. But, even today you can write .NET Standard libraries that only work on Windows, right? If you don't use the path APIs correctly, for example, and you just put backslashes everywhere, then that thing will not work on Linux either, right? So, like, you can always write code that it's not cross-platform, but the idea is that the standard is really the thing that abstracts away the .NET platform for you. And then, sure, it would be nice if it also abstract the OS for you, but that depends on what you care about, right? If you only care about Core and Windows, then who cares, right?
Right.
So, like, planning your own migration, I think, is the biggest hurdle usually, and that is something that highly depends on your own goals. In fact, I can probably plug my own MSDN article here. Like, I wrote a whole article on how you should go about porting your app. Mm-hmm. And I talk a lot about how you should approach it and how you should start thinking about these things. I mean, if you just do a tiny project, sure, big migration works probably. If you, port something larger, an existing code base with 50 to 250,000 lines of code, that gets more challenging. And if you really do something big, like, a million lines of code or 2 million lines of code, then you're very unlikely to succeed in a big move, right? You really want to think about what do you really want to move to Core, what really benefits from being on Core in the first place, and then, act accordingly. And then maybe also just remove some of your own features that none of your customers are using anymore, right? So modernize your own app as a part of the move.
Right.
And because the less code you have to port, the better you're off.
Yeah, and the more likely you're actually going to be able to pull this off.
Right.
Like, I got to think people are triaging. It's like, can I make the move to Core? And they're looking at that warning and error list as sort of their gauge. So the more you can make those, errors become warnings, the more likely they're going to go, yeah, I think we can probably get this.
Right. And that's the other thing that I usually tell people is, like, don't start with source code, start with your binaries.
Oh, yeah.
Throw your existing application in one folder, use the API port tool that we have to point it at the binaries, and then you get an Excel spreadsheet as an overview that gives you module by module how portable you are. And if you look at your own module names, you usually have, some sort of architecture, right? It's like, I don't know, businesslogic.dll, and there's data access layer.dll, there's presentation.dll. So you usually know what's in there, right? And then, yeah, you're not shocked, hopefully, when you see presentation.dll is 5% portable. But when you look at your business logic or your data access logic, and that's, 75% portable, then you have to think about, okay, what's the remaining 25% that I need to get this thing running? Because those are the things you probably want to run on multiple platforms, right? And so what we see is with customers, and we have an actual team that engages with customers. The first thing they do is running this tool and go with them over the report and say, why is this not more portable? It seems like it should be more portable. Or, how do you think about planning your UI migration? What technologies do you have in mind? And so this is usually a good point also to reevaluate your own architecture and make sure that your understanding of your own app is actually up to date, which is probably also not always the case because, code changes over time and the architecture that you made up a few years ago is no longer, the actual architecture. And so all these things help in the migration.
Yeah, you can see understanding all that being important.
Yeah. So where do we start? Do we start with your blog post? Do we start with the project?
I would say I would generally start with the blog post. It's basically the one-stop shop for. I think I even linked the MSDN article from the blog post. And if not, you can easily find it by just searching for my name in your favorite search engine. I didn't write that many articles. It should show up very quickly. And that talks about this. I think using the Compat pack itself is super easy. You just add a NuGet package reference. People know how to do that. But, usually you want to do this because you're porting an app. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily a clear-cut exercise because it highly, highly depends on what you want to port, how much you want to port, and whether it's a class library or a NuGet package or an application, right? And so my article kind of walks you through all of these scenarios a little bit. But in the end, you have to, it's kind of like plan your own adventure kind of thing, right? It's super exciting to move to core, but it's also not something that is, super cheap, right? Because you have to think about your app that you designed for Windows, designed for WinForms. Now you think of this as a cross-platform website running in a container, right? That's a very different environment, and clearly your code has to adapt somehow to take advantage of those things.
Right. Well, it sounds great, Immo. Thanks a lot for letting us know about it and talking to us about it.
Absolutely.
All right. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1. Recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC.